Okay, I think we could get going. Hello everyone, I'm Sam Killip. I'm VP of Customer Success here at Attest. Thank you so much for joining us in which I hope might be your last working hour of the day, for some of you anyway. So welcome to the first part of our ongoing series on data storytelling. As we all know, for us, our research is so full of detail. So converting that detail into a story we want to tell, and more importantly, a story others want to hear, is vital really to our success. It's not always easy though. So we want to make sure that you feel more than equipped to tackle this challenge in your role. And this is why we have created our data storytelling series to help you do just that. So keep your eyes peeled for more upcoming in our series. For today, I'm thrilled to welcome our speaker, Bianca Johnston, to talk to us on the topic of data storytelling. Hi, Bianca. Before we get started, here's a very brief agenda and some housekeeping to be aware of. We'll spend a couple of minutes looking at what data storytelling functionality is, coming soon to the Attest platform, and then I'll hand over to Bianca for the main event, how to make your CEO care about insights. You will see some polls popping up during the webinar, and I'd love it if you could answer them when you see them. Finally, if you've got any questions, we'd love to hear them. You can submit them anytime during the webinar and Bianca will be answering them at the end during the Q&A. So let's kick off with our first poll. One quick question. We have a mixture of customers here, hello customers, and others who have heard of us before, hello to you as well. And it would be great to know how often you carry out consumer research. So submit the answer most relevant to you now. How often do you carry out consumer research? And that's any consumer research, not just on the Attest platform. Okay, thanks everyone. So on to data storytelling functionality. I've already mentioned how we all know turning our data into compelling stories is a challenge, and that's why at Attest, why we've dedicated a large part of our product roadmap to expanding our data storytelling features. And I wanted to share just some of the new features we've got and have got coming up. So on to the first one great new feature that we already have live, yes, ready to use now, and that's the ability to customize your charts. You can choose what data you want to display or hide on your charts, making it easier to tell a particular story and for someone to hear your particular story. You can also change the color scheme and even use your own hex colors, so you can create beautiful branded charts. And you can see on the left-hand side of that slide a non-branded, and on the right-hand side, we've used TikTok as an example. TikTok will be very impressed with how great that looks. Then on to the next feature. So by the end of the year, and let's face it, that will be here before we know it, you'll be able to build shareable reports, adding the charts that best tell your story. You can combine insights from different demographics, segments, countries, and time periods. And you can add context to the charts with AI summaries, photos, and videos. So sharing with your CEO or anyone else is simple. You can use a view-only link that ensures they only see your curated data and don't get distracted by any other noise. And I've got to say, doesn't that look fabulous? The final thing I wanted to share with you that we're working on is bringing you instant storytelling through integrated generative AI. We're currently working hard, developing models that will analyze your survey results and deliver insightful summaries to save you time and make you efficient. For qual surveys, this will allow you to quickly pull our key story, like your key storylines from video responses and open text questions. And you'll also be able to use the AI to do the heavy lifting, analyzing quant surveys and brand trackers. It will crunch the factors that you need, age, gender, location, perhaps income, and to highlight the key findings. We've got a sample of what that might look like. And as you can see, it's pulling together all those data points at all the different places across your survey to bring you the narrative that you need. Okay, I think that's enough of me. I hope you enjoyed that little sneak peek. And you'll see that those new features will not only make it easier for you to find the stories in your data, but also to communicate them to your C-suite. You see what I've done there? On that note, I want to hand over to Bianca who's going to tell you exactly how to get your CEO's attention. Remember, you can ask any questions as we go along, and we'll take time to answer them at the end. Bianca, it's over to you.
Amazing. Thank you, Sam. And hi, everyone. I'm Bianca Johnston, and I'm really excited to talk to you today about how to get your CEO or any executive leadership to care about insights. So a little bit about me. I've been in research and marketing roles for the past 13 years, primarily research. And most recently, I was at Shopify. And now I run my own research consultancy. And over the years, I've presented to the C-suite and senior leaders. I've had my research shared in town halls and letters to the board, but best of all, I've seen my insights reflected in campaigns and business results. But I've also made some mistakes along that time. And so what I'd like to do today over the next 20 or so minutes is share what I've learned so you can avoid some of those same mistakes as we look ahead to 2025 and communicating with the C-suite. So before we do that, I just want to take a step back and quickly address why this topic really matters. I talk to a lot of researchers regularly, and one thing that often comes up is this fear or concern that we're not quite valued enough in the organization. I've definitely felt it. Maybe you have too. I don't know if you've ever sent a report out only to hear nothing but crickets in response. I used to joke early in my career, I'm like, well, I'm sending the report out into the abyss, hence this photo here. So if you can relate to that, this is going to be a great webinar for you. And if you can't, stick around anyways. And then with layoffs that's been happening over the past few years and all the talk of AI, and we're still figuring out how that is going to impact our jobs over the years to come, we can't afford not to make a big impact with our insights. And in turn, that's going to have a big impact on our careers as well. So after today's session, here's what you're going to walk away with. Number one, we're going to build your CEO blueprint. We're going to talk about what that is and how to create one. Secondly, we're going to reveal the one key question your CEO asks themselves when presented with any info. And finally, we're going to look at practical ways to lower the cognitive load when preparing decks or presentations for your C-suite audience. So let's start with the CEO blueprint, also known as know your audience, which is advice I'm sure you've heard before. So let's look at what that looks like for the CEO. So what is a CEO blueprint? Well, when I was at Shopify, we had this idea internally of a blueprint, and it's really a document that a leader in the company, but really anyone in the company, could create one, and they'd create it about themselves, and it would outline what they value, how they like to receive information, their management style, communication style, etc. So today we're going to flip that idea around, and we're going to talk about how you can create one for your CEO or any C-suite executive that you want to communicate with or get the attention of. And the inputs into the blueprint consist of two parts. One, who they are, and two, what they care about. And before we go on and learning how to create one, I just want you to keep in mind that the blueprint is a living document. It'll change over time as you learn more within your company and have more experiences with the C-suite. And it's going to be a handy guide that you can refer to whenever you're doing your executive communications. So the first input is the profile of your CEO. When you're thinking of this, you're thinking of things like their professional background. What track did they take up to become CEO? Was it more technical, like engineering, finance, operations? Were they a founder? Was it go-to-market, marketing? These kinds of things will influence the decisions they make and what they care about, and the context they currently have. So practically speaking, where do we find this stuff? Well, start on LinkedIn. Where else have they worked? Can you find anything public on their reputation or legacy at previous companies? Are there articles about them? Check the media. Have they been interviewed or been on podcasts? Lots of CEOs are writing books these days. Read them if yours has one. Talk to your colleagues. A lot of this is institutional knowledge, and you can really gain from those experiences. So you want to use these sources to better understand your CEO's worldview. The next input is their priorities. And from this, we're going to understand their values. So here's just a snapshot of what's likely at the top or near the top of your CEO's priority list: growth, profitability, market position, setting the strategic vision for the entire company, managing risk. Of course, there's likely much more that's on their list, but if these things aren't being met, none of the other things are really going to be addressed either. So we kind of put these at the top of what they're getting in the mindset of what they could be thinking about. And so how do you find out what your CEO cares about when it comes to their priorities? Well, you want to listen to and read between the lines when it comes to what they're addressing in town halls, letters to the board, annual reports, earnings calls. Identify what metrics your CEO cares about and references to their stakeholders. Ask your data team if there's an executive dashboard. A lot of this stuff really is company specific. So ask around for examples of really strong executive communications within your company and really kind of read between the lines and dissect what's being highlighted. With these two inputs of profile and priorities, we can look at an example now of what a CEO blueprint could look like. So I'm going to work my way around these squares. So we're starting with the profile. In this example, let's say we have a CEO with an operations background. So they're a former COO. Let's say they did, Six Sigma training. They're really keen on lean process and optimization. So there are some inputs there. And then moving to the right, we'd look at their priorities and understand their values a little bit more. So they might really care about growth and scale without increasing costs. Product quality and customer satisfaction might be really important to them, efficiency and productivity. From that, moving down to the bottom right, we're going to think about how, taking what we know from their profile and priorities, how can we connect with them, given what we know about our customers and the insights. So what do we have as insights professionals that relate to what they care about? And this we're calling the metrics that matter. So for an example here, a CEO who cares about growth and scale without increasing costs, maybe it's metrics related to regular feature assessments to ensure the company isn't investing in product attributes that people aren't willing to pay for. Or for someone who cares about product quality and customer satisfaction, it would be surfacing those CSAT and quality scores over time and identifying opportunities to improve. A key thing here is that CEOs tend to look at analytics data a lot more. And so you'd want to partner with those teams to bring the insights into that. And that can kind of sometimes be a gateway if that's a challenge with your specific CEO. Finally, moving to the bottom left, given what you know about their profile, their priorities, and the metrics that matter, you want to think about now how to communicate with them. So for instance, in this example, someone whose top value is efficiency, you're going to want to get to the point quickly. Someone with an operations background will likely want an execution-focused summary. So you want to make sure you're really highlighting the feasibility of implementing those insights. Or on the flip side, because their background is completely in operations, maybe they need more context on your areas of expertise, whether it's research or marketing, whatever line of business you support. And then you take all of this information and you bring it together with your team, discuss it with your team, your manager, and you make sure you're aligned together on what this means for your function and how you communicate as a team to the C-suite, because you want to kind of be a united front here. So is this a lot of work? It's a little bit of work up front, yes, but you do it once and then you just add to it and make it better and better over time. And it's going to be highly efficient in the long run to have this blueprint to refer to. And if you still have any doubts, I ask you, as a researcher, would you ever advise the marketing team to develop a campaign without deep knowledge of their customer? Never. So this is kind of the same thing. It's like a know your audience, develop the best possible communications for them. So now let's start thinking about what that communication can look like. And before we jump into this section of the key question, I just want to, we're researchers, right? We're really good at empathy. Let's empathize for a second of what a typical CEO's day might be like. So lots of meetings, perhaps some travel, leading teams, making decisions, lots of reviewing and approving things. There could be customer-facing events. There could be board and investor meetings. There's lots going on, right? The list goes on, and they're getting pulled in a million directions. So with anyone that busy and in demand, when they're presented with any information, they're wondering this one key question: why should I care? So within the first few seconds of any meeting, any document they're looking at, assume that this is what they're thinking. Why should I pay attention to this? And implicit in that is, what does it mean for me? What do I need to do with this info? Ultimately, what action do I need to take? So our job as insights professionals is to quickly get to answering this one key question and to keep it in mind with everything we put in front of the C-suite. And so how do we get them to care is the next natural question that we would have, and the answer here lies in data storytelling. So I'm sure as researchers you're aware of data storytelling, but for those who need a little refresher, It can be really broken down into three elements: data, visuals, and the narrative. And what data storytelling allows us to do is really turn raw data or numbers into a meaningful story that makes results easy to understand, offers insight, and ultimately drives action and decision making. Because the name of the game here is influence. Because if we're not influencing action with our research, why are we doing it? So many of us, and this is myself included, like to use a chronological sequence when using data storytelling. It makes sense, right? There's a beginning, there's a middle, and there's an end. And it's what we're used to if you think about tropes like the hero's journey and every Disney movie or storybook we've ever read. In its most basic form, the narrative structure is we have a setup, we have some sort of conflict or tension, problem we need to solve, and then the resolution. And so you've likely employed this in your own reports using data storytelling frameworks such as what, so what, now what, or data, insight, action. And these are great. I use them all the time. But when you're talking to the CEO audience, you want to flip that on its head and you want to start with the end. Lead with the answer, the action, the what to do. And in this way, you're answering the why should I care question as soon as possible, and therefore keeping your audience's attention. And then you can back it up with the supporting arguments, any relevant context that's needed, and concise, tailored data visualization. So far, we've talked about building the CEO blueprint and answering this one key question of why should I care? So by starting at the end, right? So in this section, I'd like to get into some practical steps on preparing materials for your CEO. And the overarching theme here is lowering the cognitive load for your audience. Make it easy for them. So I'm going to talk about this in three parts. We have the format, the slides, and then the presentation. So starting with the format, what should you even be creating for a presentation or interaction with your CEO where you want to share insights? When we think about format, the key is really flexibility, because the reality is your CEO might be 25 minutes late to a 30-minute meeting, or they might interrupt you and say, I know all this, what should I do? And this is especially true as you're learning to work with a new CEO, or perhaps you're new at a company and you're still working on building that blueprint. So you should be prepared for everything from a 30-minute, 10-slide meeting to a 30-second, tell me what I need to know conversation with no slides. So I like to have all three versions ready. I have a deck. I recommend no more than 10 slides, an executive summary, which I like to keep to one slide, and then a 1 to 3 sentence elevator pitch. So I'm going to double click on the elevator pitch a little bit. So the name comes from, I don't know how many of you are back in office or remote, but it comes from when we were all in office and you walk by someone or you're with them in an elevator and they go, hey, what happened with that research? Or give me the quick TLDR. And so your objective here is to distill your executive summary, which is already brought down to one page, down to one main idea, communicated in 1 to 2, up to max 3 sentences. There's a few benefits of doing this. Number one, it allows you to create a bit of a soundbite. So sound bites are easier to repeat throughout your presentation, so they're going to be committed to memory better. And sound bites also get shared more often. And if you want to have impact, your insights need to be shareable. And so you might not even end up using this elevator pitch, but I still highly recommend writing it because it's a really helpful exercise to clarify your story, both for yourself and for your executive stakeholders. Next, we're going to talk about how to lower the cognitive load in your slides. So for a CEO audience, remember we're answering why should I care? And so we want to get to the point quickly. How? Well, the first way is to hook them with a headline. Remember your blueprint. What is likely to catch their attention? As a researcher, we often wear many hats, and one of those could be likened to either a content creator or a writer or journalist. You need to have that sort of like headline that we're all so used to seeing. Not clickbait, but a catchy headline that's going to catch their attention. It needs to draw them in by answering why they should care or what they should do. There's this concept, if you're working on these and you have sort of your 10-page deck and you're trying to create headlines, a way to check if you're sort of getting the hang of it and doing a good job on this is this concept of horizontal reading. So anyone should be able to flip through your deck and just read the headlines and get the story. So that's kind of a good way to check yourself. The second is not to bury the lead. You may have heard this one. And for this one, I have a bit of a story. So I was once presenting to a VP, and in this case, I was making a case for more investment. And I gave all this preamble about how many teams it would impact and how good it was going to be and how important for the business. And then finally, after, probably 10 minutes of that, I finally got into the time and money savings. And she stopped me and she was like, next time, just lead with that. Like, don't bury the lead. And so I share that advice to you today as well. Don't wait to reveal the most critical information that's needed to make the decision, especially with this audience. Lead with that up front. And we talked earlier about start with the end with your overarching story. You want to try to do that within each slide as well. The third way to lower the cognitive load, and a piece of advice I have for your slides, is to have a point of view. So as a researcher, like I said, we wear many hats. And one of those is really to think of yourself as a consultant to the business. You're the data expert. So having a well thought out and data informed point of view gives you credibility and gets your CEO to pay attention. And if this makes you a little uncomfortable or nervous, or you're like, who am I to be telling this person what to do? Remember that research is one of many inputs for the business and therefore for your CEO. It's one piece of their puzzle, right? And they have many departments. Think about how we talked about their day. They're reviewing stuff all day long and making decisions. So think if you have all these departments presenting data and insights and information for them to consider and make decisions with. Now consider how much harder that would be if everyone was sort of like unsure and like not really confident with those recommendations and kind of hedging their bets. So you want to instill confidence, and in turn, your conviction is going to instill trust, make their job easier, and therefore make them come back to you more and more over time. And finally, you want to lower the cognitive load visually. So using visuals that pop. There are a ton of great examples in this book here called Storytelling with Data by Cole Nussbaumer-Knaflic. I highly recommend this resource if you hadn't read it. It's really transformed how I present data visually, and a lot of my recommendations have come from things that were influenced from this book. But at a high level, you want to make sure you're making 1 point per slide and that you're using color, design elements, and text strategically to draw the eye to where you want it to go. So we've covered a lot on this slide, and I think it'd be really helpful if we took a look at an example to kind of see all this stuff in action of lowering the cognitive load. So here is a what not to do. So we have a descriptive headline. It is telling us what we see in the data below. Consumers have been buying more small packs over the past year. We have on the left a line graph with a separate legend. And I'm sorry, again, if this is quite small, it says small packs, medium packs, large packs, each one a different color. And it's kind of, okay, lots of colors here. It's not super complicated, but I don't know where my eye is supposed to look. I have a random pie chart on the top right. I have this random line of text below. I don't know what that refers to. What's the priority? Basically, this slide is packed with data, but has no insight or story. This one is much better. So the headline is an action. It tells the reader what to do. In addition, the color coding, smaller pack size, instantly connects to that line in the graph that is highlighted, and everything else is grayed out. So that is like lowering cognitive load in action. It's sort of like red, my eye instantly brings those two together. I know that's what this is talking about. The legend is removed, which whenever I can and my chart allows, I like to do that and just line up the labels with the graph as much as possible. And then like I said, the medium pack and large pack lines, they're grayed out because we're telling 1 point per slide. And that's also why we removed the irrelevant pie chart. And then we have this line in the data, in the timeline, and a dotted arrow that leads to this additional context, which says, there were some changes in Q2 in May, and that led to drastic changes in consumer behavior. This is all fictional, obviously. And that's great because it's tying it to the actual graph, and it's relevant context that anticipates the question of what happened here. So with that example done, we have one last section, and it's how to lower the cognitive load for the presentation. So the first way we want to lower the cognitive load for your CEO when it comes to presenting is really being prepared but not scripted. So your slides should have minimal text and you should never read directly from them. And honestly, this still happens with very senior people. They just kind of get in the mode and they're delivering a scripted monologue, and this makes it really difficult to stay on the same track of where your CEO is going. And if they're asking questions and you have to kind of like jump back into where was I, it doesn't create a nice presentation that flows. So as much as possible, the greatest advice I got was, you want to look at a slide and know from looking at it exactly the thing you want to say. And it doesn't have to be the exact words, but you have to know the points you want to make on a slide. And then you deliver it in whichever way it comes out. You practice a few times, but it doesn't have to be scripted. And this is also where that one visual per slide or 1 point per slide really helps. You want to invite questions throughout. And so when you're not scripted, it's easier to jump back in, and this keeps you and your CEO on the same track throughout the presentation. And then you want to go back to your blueprint on this point as well. So what questions might they have? What areas are they less familiar with? And what objections might they have? Like, what are some sticking points that you know from your research about knowing your audience that they have strong opinions about? So you can be prepared. So what I like to do is I always have a very concise deck, but then I have a lot of other slides available for the questions I'm anticipating. And finally, be ready to pivot. So this is why we have the 3 versions. Your CEO might get a call 5 minutes into your meeting and say, just give me the quick summary. Or on the flip side, they might end up going on a deep tangent with others in the room, and you might need to bring them back on track because you know the objective for the meeting and the time you have. So you kind of have to read the room and make sure that objective gets achieved. So if there's one thing I would like you to take away from today's session, it's this. Through understanding your audience using the CEO blueprint and the 1 key question of why should I care, you can craft reports and presentations that lower the cognitive load and ultimately influence decision making. And this in turn makes you a much more impactful researcher to your organization, which is a win-win for both of you. Thank you. Now we have time to open it up for questions.
Thanks, Bianca. That was really insightful. I was pretty gripped by that. I do think that the rule of why should I care applies not just to CEOs, but probably to all our professional interactions and
Totally.
perhaps some of our personal ones as well. Anyway, okay. Over to the questions. I'm going to look at because I've got them coming up on the screen over here.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Okay. This is a tricky one, I think. How do I handle situations where my CEO disagrees with the insights or has a strong bias against the data?
Yes. Okay. So there's a couple of things we can do, and it depends on what their sort of sticking points would be. But we were just kind of talking about this, about what objections can you sort of anticipate. One is know your story, kind of have your cheat sheet, and your team might already have this for any doubters out there about data quality. How can you talk about whether it's you're using panel or whether it's just how do we communicate? A lot of people don't really know with surveys, kind of they think surveys equal bias. So what is your cheat sheet kind of go-to response on some of that? And then you want to tailor that for your CEO. Another trick is, can you corroborate with third-party data? Sometimes that's a way in to sort of, I've had a situation where a president of a company was like, and we were using our own customers, and he said, I just don't really trust this. I think there's response bias in this. So we corroborated with third-party data, and it ended up tracking, thankfully. And sometimes that just helps build that trust, so that next time you know how that kind of shakes out when you can triangulate that way. You could also try a reframe. Are there ways to use different analogies, knowing what you know from the blueprint that might make them sort of, I think that one on its own might not work, but combined with some of these other ones might kind of help. And then finally, present the risks of ignoring the research. It is their decision. They might have more information than you do, but you can say, these are the quality checks we've done. Here's how we can check it externally. And these are the risks of ignoring this for the business.
Yeah. So it's sort of a combination of showing how you can trust the data you have and then corroborating it elsewhere if you need to.
If possible, yeah, depending on how intense that distrust is.
Hopefully persuasive enough to just do with what you have. Okay. Someone says, great presentation, Bianca. Do you have any tips on how to communicate the importance in demographic changes?
How to communicate the importance in demographic changes. Could we elaborate a little bit more, like visually, or is there?
Oh, I don't know. I will come back
Yeah,
to that one. If the questioner
if they
could
could,
just
yeah.
clarify that a bit more, we'll come back to you.
Mhm.
Let me move on to the next one is how do I maintain the balance between customization for different C-suite audiences and keeping a consistent message across the organization?
Oh, I like that one. Um, yeah, so I think what's helpful, and so when we talked about developing something for the C-suite, we have those three versions. That flexibility is key. And I always recommend this as well. Even you kind of have your report that's a readout, but a presentation deck is different. So this is sort of similar. Now you're going to have multiple versions. And I know nobody wants to be creating multiple versions because it's time consuming, but ultimately the goal is to get your insights to be acted upon. So if that's what's necessary, sometimes you have to do that. So a way to make it easier is really to align on the, oh, okay, it's asking me if I want to switch microphones. Hope you can still hear me.
I
Let me give me a thumbs up if you can still hear me. Okay, cool. I think my iPhone Bluetooth was blowing up. Okay. Um, you want to align on what are the core insights that can stay consistent across all of these versions, like kind of, and then you sort of, so you have your base always consistent, and then you can think about the blueprints and sort of a layer of like, okay, how would I tailor this for someone in finance versus someone in marketing versus the CEO? So I think just kind of having that flexible framework, that's sort of what are the core insights, and then what is my base, and then think about sort of your tailoring for the multiple groups.
So it's almost starting with your elevator pitch because that's where you
Yeah,
can base your, and
exactly.
then sort of growing out depending on who
Exactly.
you're
Yeah.
talking
Yeah.
to.
You have your sound bite, that's like the sound bite is getting shared, but then what are the implications basically for the different, different disciplines?
Yeah. Let me have a look. Oh, speaking of sound bites, this is what I'm particularly interested in your view on.
Mhm.
Do you think it's helpful to bring stats to life with qual quotes from customers?
Yes, I love this. I am a big proponent of quant plus qual.
Mm,
Whether that's some open ends within the survey or video or audio responses within a survey or a two-part actual study with full quant, full qual. This I do a lot of quant, but I always have some open ends in it, and you're writing the story, you're doing it, and it just comes so much more to life, as you know, when you bring in that qual. So yes, I do recommend that for a CEO audience. But I would say use quotes sparingly. Like sometimes in reports, I'll have a lot if I know my stakeholder likes that. But for a CEO, I would pick like the most salient, pithiest ones that
mhm.
really connect with the quant story and really help bring it to life. Don't throw about a bunch in there because you think it would be good if it's not really helping to tell that story. But yes, absolutely, it really can bring it to life.
So almost like humanizing the points that you want to make.
Yes,
Uh,
exactly.
it's good at getting to know your customers. Okay, so thank you for the person who asked the question. You've added more detail around, so I'll just go from the top
Yeah,
again. So great presentation, Bianca. I think that's worth saying again.
thank you.
Do you have any tips on how to communicate the importance in demographic changes? For example, if we are seeing a positive trend in our proportion of female customers, how would you approach communicating this to, say, an e-com finance audience?
Okay, I love this because often, for instance, when we're doing trackers, we see difference in results, and I don't know that people always check the demographics, and because sometimes the actual audience is shifting, and this is when you're using your own customer base. So I love that you're looking at that, and so I like to put a slide up front and say when we're looking at these results, these changes that we're seeing are not necessarily because of changes in the business or something that's happened. Our actual base has shifted, and that's why we're seeing these changes. So I don't know if that helps and answers the question, but that's something I would put up front to understand that the demographic of your business is changing, and that's why that's what's impacting the subsequent metrics.
So sort of overlaying the narrative around why you're seeing the
Yeah.
change you're seeing and
It's
sort of
kind of like the
emphasizing.
chapter. It's yeah,
Yeah.
that's a place where like chapter one, this is context that needs to be shown before the rest of the story.
It sort of emphasizes the importance of knowing your customer base really before you can
Yeah,
start on anything else, I suppose.
exactly.
I think we've got time for one more. Yes. What tools do you use for data visualization?
So I use Canva a lot. I use slides. You can do a ton in slides, and I'm really comfortable and fast with it now. So nothing super fancy. And if I'm using a particular platform, I will use the platform's tools as well, because they're just getting so much easier and better to use. So that's always a nice kind of copy paste into a report. We're always, as we know, reporting takes a long time. So I love doing that as well.
Top tip there. I'm actually going to just ask one last one because it's related, is what's the best format to present insights to colleagues? Is it printed reports? Is it PowerPoint presentations or PDFs?
I like PowerPoint or slides in my case, because I used to work in a world where it was create the report behind the scenes, wait for the big reveal, send it out, and then, have a presentation, talk about it then. And then I moved into environments where everything was out in the open and accessible, even as a work in progress. And this terrified me at the beginning, but then I came to really see the value of it and started building in conjunction with my stakeholders. Like, they wouldn't be in the deck as I'm building it, but if I was building something out, I could shoot them a comment, say, this is what I'm seeing. Is this what you're seeing in the data that you're looking at as well? And then when it's sent out, people can just comment directly in. So I like a live Google Slides or PowerPoint deck where people can comment in it, and then it becomes sort of a live thing that people discuss.
Yeah, so it's almost like a living, I think there's the cliche, isn't it? A living, breathing document.
Yes,
rather than
exactly.
set in stone from beginning to end. And
exactly. I've evolved on that in my career. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, I think that's probably all we've got time for. Thank you so much, Bianca. Before you go, we'd just like to check in and see how valuable you found the session. So another quick poll. We'd love to know your feedback and if you'd be interested in joining a follow-up webinar on how to socialize insights more widely within your organization. So poll number 1, how would you describe your learning from today's webinar? I feel ready to impress my CEO. I'm inspired and want to learn more. I'm still not quite sure where to start with data storytelling. So if you could just pop your answer into that, I'd be very grateful. And then the next one, as researchers, please ignore the fact we're asking a yes/no question. Would you be interested in attending a follow-up webinar about how to socialize insights more widely within your organization? Okay, great. Right. Thank you so much for everyone for all your time and your questions. As Rachel popped up on the chat, we'll be sending out a recording of the webinar tomorrow, along with a copy of the slides, so you can watch it again at your leisure. If you have any more questions for Bianca or want to learn more about her services, you can get in touch via her website, LinkedIn, or email her directly. And if you'd like to know any more about data storytelling with Attest, you can always drop me a line using the details on screen. I love hearing from customers, non-customers, talking about research, talking about your problems, so I'd love to hear from you. Remember, this is just part 1 of our data storytelling series, so keep an eye out for more information on follow-up sessions, including our upcoming playbook, which we'll be releasing soon. Thank you again for taking the time to join us, and we look forward to being part of your story in the future. Can I say that? Have a good evening.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.